Bikini Bottom is a product of nuclear testing. This theory connects the cartoon city directly to Bikini Atoll, the real Pacific location used for extensive nuclear weapons tests during the Cold War. Dozens of detonations rocked that atoll between 1946 and 1958, including massive underwater blasts that sent shockwaves and radioactive fallout through the surrounding lagoon. In the show's canon, Bikini Bottom sits right beneath that same atoll, which gives fans a geographic bridge between history and fiction. Supporters argue that radiation explains why sea creatures there talk, build cities, hold jobs, and run restaurants instead of behaving like normal marine life. The exaggerated science, advanced gadgets, and odd mutations fit neatly into a pop culture idea of radiation transforming organisms into something entirely new. Even the decision to use the name Bikini carries weight, since it is not random ocean trivia, but a direct reference to a site associated with atomic testing. The underwater setting matters too, because several real-world tests were conducted below the surface, contaminating the seabed itself. Put all that together, and the theory frames Bikini Bottom as a post-nuclear ecosystem where ordinary sea life evolved into the fully functioning society they portray on screen. The Krabby Patty secret ingredient is crab meat. This theory leans heavily on one unforgettable line from Midlife Crustacean, where Mr. Krabs takes a bite of a Krabby Patty and casually says, "So that's what I taste like."
So that's what I taste like.
That single comment links the flavor of the burger directly to crab biology, and fans have never let it go. Crabs are strangely rare in Bikini Bottom. Aside from Mr. Krabs and Pearl, adult crabs barely appear, which fuels the idea that their low population is not random. If crabs are being harvested, scarcity suddenly makes sense. The secret formula is guarded with extreme paranoia, transported under heavy security, and treated like priceless treasure. That level of protection suggests something rare and potentially controversial. Mr. Krabs' relentless greed only intensifies the suspicion. He has never shown hesitation about exploiting a resource if it turns a profit. Some versions of the theory even suggest a blend of real crab meat and imitation seafood to stretch supply, mirroring real-world practices. When the town cannot stop eating Krabby Patties and the owner is literally a crab, the connection feels disturbingly direct within their underwater economy. By the way, if you guys like theories like these, I would really appreciate it if you could subscribe. Thanks. Anyways, the main characters represent the 7 deadly sins. This theory lines each core resident of Bikini Bottom up with a classic vice, and the matches feel almost too clean. SpongeBob usually stands in for lust, not in a romantic sense, but as overwhelming desire. He craves experiences, approval, fun, and work with relentless intensity. Patrick embodies sloth, proudly doing nothing, dodging effort, and sinking into pure inertia whenever responsibility shows up. Squidward channels wrath through constant irritation, explosive anger, and deep resentment toward the chaos around him. Mr. Krabs fits greed so perfectly it barely needs explanation, since money drives nearly every decision he makes. Plankton represents envy, obsessing over the Krabby Patty formula and seething at Mr. Krabs' success year after year. Sandy aligns with pride because of her fierce confidence, competitive streak, and belief in her own abilities as a scientist and fighter. Gary rounds it out as gluttony, consistently portrayed as food-focused and eager to indulge the second a bowl hits the floor. When those traits are stacked together, the cast forms a full moral spectrum, turning a bright underwater comedy into a surprisingly structured allegory about vice, personality, and exaggerated human flaws. Pearl's parents were killed by whalers. The idea paints Mr. Krabs in a surprisingly layered light. Pearl's a teenage sperm whale living under the roof of a tiny crab who once worked as a Navy cook before building the Krusty Krab empire, and that odd pairing has always begged for backstory. Her mother never appears on screen, never gets named, and that silence feels intentional. Fans connect that gap to the ocean's brutal history of whaling, especially since sperm whales were prime targets for oil. Mr. Krabs talks about his years at sea, about hooks and danger, and he clearly knows how harsh maritime life can be. In one episode, he clutches a whale's pearl and calls it mother of pearl with real emotion, and that moment hits differently if he's remembering loss. He's greedy, sure, but he's also wildly devoted to Pearl, spending huge amounts to keep her happy. That contrast fuels the theory that he found her orphaned after a whaling tragedy and chose to raise her as his own. It gives their cross-species family a redemptive edge and adds weight to every Pearl reference. It reshapes their bond into something unexpectedly tender and tragic and meaningful. SpongeBob is a war veteran. This theory, often called Sponge Nom by fans, reframes his cheerful fry cook routine as the afterlife of military service. He lives on a strict schedule, springs out of bed at the same time every morning, and treats work like a sacred duty. That kind of structure mirrors military conditioning, where routine keeps everything in line. He constantly calls superiors sir, respects chain of command without hesitation, and takes enormous pride in wearing a uniform. His loyalty to Mr. Krabs, who has a confirmed Navy background, adds another layer since it suggests a shared culture of service. Supporters also focus on SpongeBob's emotional swings. He can flip from unstoppable optimism to intense panic in seconds, and some interpret that hyper-positivity as overcompensation. The setting fuels the theory too. Bikini Bottom sits beneath Bikini Atoll, a real-world nuclear testing site tied to post-war military history. Explosions, drills, alarms, and high-pressure chaos pop up constantly in his life, yet he reacts with trained readiness rather than confusion. When those traits are stacked together, the image forms of a former soldier recreating structure in civilian life while coping in his own relentlessly upbeat way. Each character is addicted to a drug. This theory maps their exaggerated personalities onto specific substances and builds a strange but organized pattern. SpongeBob gets linked to hallucinogens because of his elastic imagination, emotional swings, and almost permanent euphoria. He'll bounce from bliss to panic in seconds, which fans compare to the highs and lows of a psychedelic trip. Patrick usually represents marijuana, thanks to his slow reactions, constant hunger, relaxed posture, and total indifference to responsibility. Squidward gets assigned opioids, with supporters pointing to his chronic apathy, isolation, irritability, and drained outlook on life. His low energy and lack of motivation line up neatly with that profile. Mr. Krabs often symbolizes cocaine in this framework, fueled by paranoia, obsessive money chasing, and explosive overreactions whenever his formula feels threatened. Mrs. Puff joins that stimulant category too, since her anxiety spikes fast and her temper follows close behind. Sandy stands out as the disciplined outlier, the grounded presence surrounded by chaos, which fans interpret as sobriety in contrast to everyone else. Some versions stretch the idea further and treat Bikini Bottom itself like a cycle of dependency, where customers compulsively crave Krabby Patties and emotional extremes reset every episode, reinforcing the addiction allegory across the entire cast. Mr. Krabs is raising Pearl for slaughter. This theory leans hard into his reputation as Bikini Bottom's most relentless businessman. Pearl's confirmed as a sperm whale, and historically that species brought in massive value from blubber, oil, and rare materials like ambergris. In a town whose economy revolves around selling sea-based food, that kind of biological jackpot doesn't go unnoticed. Mr. Krabs has shown again and again that profit sits at the center of his worldview. He'll cut corners, squeeze pennies, and calculate value in almost everything around him. So fans take that mindset and stretch it to its darkest extreme. Pearl is a long-term investment. She's the largest creature in Bikini Bottom, which means potential resources on a scale no one else can match. He even talks about her future in terms of business, imagining her helping run the Krusty Krab and contributing to the bottom line. Add in his constant use of the phrase mother of pearl, tying whales and value together in one breath, and the theory gains an unsettling layer. It reframes his frugality and future planning as something colder, where affection and economics blur into one calculation. The show is a metaphor for World War II Germany. This theory builds a symbolic map between Bikini Bottom and wartime Europe, assigning each major character a geopolitical role. SpongeBob is positioned as a stand-in for a hyper-disciplined regime, with his rigid work ethic, obsession with hierarchy, and constant need for approval interpreted as echoes of authoritarian structure. Mr. Krabs becomes the industrial profiteer figure, controlling the most valuable commodity in town and benefiting from non-stop competition over it. Plankton fits the role of rival states and intelligence forces, since his entire existence revolves around espionage, sabotage, and stealing proprietary information from a fortified establishment. The Chum Bucket's cold metallic design strengthens that industrial war aesthetic. Sandy often represents the United States in this framework, armed with advanced technology, physical strength, and a willingness to step in to conflicts directly. Patrick is viewed as the uninformed civilian population, drifting, disengaged, and easily influenced by louder personalities. Even Bikini Bottom's transportation system gets folded into the analogy, with submarine-like buses compared to naval fleets. Recurring explosions and dramatic destruction gags are interpreted as stylized nods to wartime devastation. When When all those parallels are layered together, fans see an allegorical wartime landscape beneath the bright animation. Mr. Krabs sold his soul. This one barely needs stretching because the show literally treats souls as tradable property. In Born Again Krabs, he ends up near death after refusing to waste a rotting Krabby Patty, and during that supernatural chaos, he bargains with the Flying Dutchman over ownership of his soul. The series makes it clear that souls function as real currency in their world. The wildest moment comes when he accepts 62 cents in exchange for SpongeBob's soul without hesitation. The dialogue openly calls it a sale, and other characters react with genuine outrage, confirming it is not symbolic. Later, another gag shows the Flying Dutchman attempting to collect on Mr. Krabs' soul, only to discover that he has already issued IOUs to multiple ghosts and monsters. There is literally a line of supernatural entities waiting to claim him. That detail pushes the theory from dramatic exaggeration into established pattern. He treats his own soul like inventory, and someone else's like spare change. When greed defines his every decision, extending that logic into the afterlife feels disturbingly consistent within the show's supernatural rules. Every character has a mental illness. This theory treats Bikini Bottom like a lineup of psychological case studies, matching each exaggerated personality to a clinical profile. SpongeBob is most often linked to attention deficit hyperactivity disorder because of his non-stop movement, impulsive decisions, rapid speech, and laser focus on whatever excites him in the moment. Patrick gets associated with intellectual disability due to his limited reasoning skills, confusion over basic tasks, and heavy reliance on others to guide him. Squidward lines up with major depressive disorder and social anxiety, shown through isolation, chronic dissatisfaction, irritability, and a constant sense that life has passed him by. Mr. Krabs is commonly tied to narcissistic or obsessive traits since money dominates his thinking and empathy disappears when profit is on the table. Plankton is mapped to bipolar patterns or antisocial tendencies, swinging between grand ambition and crushing defeat while manipulating anyone he can. Sandy is sometimes viewed through the lens of emotional intensity and risk-driven behavior. Mrs. Puff fits chronic anxiety, living in a permanent state of panic because of boarding school chaos. Together, their amplified traits form a cartoon ecosystem reflecting distinct mental health archetypes. Krabby Patties contain whale vomit. This theory hinges on ambergris, a rare waxy substance produced inside sperm whales that's often nicknamed whale vomit. In real-world marine biology, ambergris forms when indigestible bits like squid beaks get coated in a secretion inside the whale, then eventually expelled into the ocean where it hardens and floats. It's incredibly rare, produced by a tiny percentage of sperm whales, and it's been worth massive amounts of money for centuries. That alone makes it sound like something Mr. Krabs would frame and sell by the slice. Pearl's confirmed as a sperm whale, which directly connects the Krabs household to the only species known to produce ambergris. Bikini Bottom runs on seafood and ocean products, so the idea of a marine-derived additive sliding into a burger doesn't feel out of place in their world. Ambergris has historically been used in consumable goods and prized for its unique properties, which lines up with the mysterious secret formula that keeps Plankton permanently frustrated. Mr. Krabs guards that recipe like treasure, and fans argue that a rare, outrageously valuable whale byproduct would explain why no one else can replicate the taste or the profit margin. The show is a representation of global warming. This theory reframes Bikini Bottom as a symbolic climate system where every character reflects a piece of the crisis. SpongeBob is interpreted as a manufactured kitchen sponge rather than a natural sea creature, representing human-made waste drifting into the ocean. His very existence becomes a symbol of pollution embedded in a marine ecosystem. Mr. Krabs fits the role of profit-driven industry, constantly prioritizing revenue over responsibility, mirroring corporations accused of fueling environmental damage while chasing higher margins. Patrick represents apathetic consumer culture, lounging, consuming, and rarely questioning consequences. His indifference becomes a stand-in for public inaction. Squidward aligns with environmental advocates, frustrated, vocal, and routinely ignored, despite sounding alarms about the chaos around him. Sandy embodies technological adaptation, surviving underwater through advanced equipment and scientific innovation, echoing real-world reliance on engineering solutions to confront climate threats. Bikini Bottom itself operates like an industrialized society under the sea, packed with infrastructure, vehicles, and commerce. When those elements are viewed together, the colorful cartoon setting transforms into an allegory about pollution, corporate power, societal apathy, activism, and humanity's attempt to engineer its way through an environmental crisis unfolding beneath the surface. Squidward is a hired caretaker. This theory reframes his entire existence next to SpongeBob as a paid obligation rather than tragic coincidence. SpongeBob works as a fry cook, yet he owns a spacious pineapple house packed with furniture, utilities, and even a pet. That level of comfort doesn't exactly scream entry-level salary. Supporters argue his parents are secretly wealthy and bought the house so he could live independently without struggling. If that's true, placing someone nearby to supervise him starts to sound practical. Enter Squidward. He lives next door, works beside him, and constantly monitors his behavior. He steps in when SpongeBob's ideas spiral out of control, scolds him before disasters unfold, and often acts like an exhausted supervisor rather than just an irritated neighbor. Squidward also never fully escapes. Even when he moves away, he ends up back in Bikini Bottom. Fans interpret that pattern as an obligation pulling him back. Add in his artistic ambitions and questionable financial stability, and a quiet arrangement funded by wealthy parents becomes believable. The theory paints Squidward as a reluctant guardian stuck in a long-term contract, babysitting an overly enthusiastic adult while pretending it's just neighborly frustration. Patrick is a supervillain. This theory flips his clueless best friend image into a carefully crafted disguise. Across the series, he causes enormous destruction, leveling property, endangering neighbors, and dragging SpongeBob into reckless schemes that spiral fast. The damage is not small-scale slapstick, it is often city-wide chaos with real consequences inside their world. One of the most quoted moments comes from the card, when Patrick casually says, "You cannot always expect my usual brand of stupidity, I like to mix it up."
Can't always expect my usual brand of stupidity. I like to mix it up.
Fans treat that line like a confession. It suggests awareness, even strategy, behind the foolish act. He has shown flashes of intelligence before snapping back to confusion, which supporters interpret as selective performance. When he pets it Gary, mishandles responsibility, or convinces SpongeBob to break rules, he rarely shows guilt afterward. There are episodes where he gains authority or special powers, and instead of rising heroically, he becomes domineering and destructive. That pattern fuels the idea that chaos follows him because he engineers it. Viewed through that lens, the slow speech and blank stares become camouflage, hiding someone who understands far more than he lets on. SpongeBob and Squidward's homes are remnants of a tiki bar. This theory ties their bizarre architecture to one shared origin story. SpongeBob's pineapple house is canonically confirmed to have fallen from a ship before landing on the ocean floor. That detail immediately connects his home to human objects lost at sea. Right next door sits Squidward's house, designed as a giant moai-style head inspired by Polynesian sculpture. Both structures lean heavily into oceanic and tiki aesthetics, which the series uses throughout its visual style. In real-world design, pineapples and carved tiki heads are classic decorations in Polynesian-themed cocktail lounges and resort bars. They are not random tropical props, they are staples of that specific aesthetic. Supporters of the theory argue that it makes more sense for those two oversized decorative pieces to have once stood together in a themed bar setting, possibly even on a cruise ship before sinking as a unit. If a ship carrying tiki decor went down, a hollow pineapple structure and a massive carved head landing side by side suddenly feels logical. Instead of isolated oddities, their homes become matching artifacts from a sunken tropical lounge, now repurposed as underwater real estate. Patrick has antisocial personality disorder. This theory takes his chaotic behavior and lines it up with the clinical profile of antisocial personality disorder, which centers on chronic disregard for others, impulsivity, aggression, deceit, and lack of remorse. Patrick's unemployed adult who drifts through Bikini Bottom with zero structure, and that alone isn't shocking, but his pattern of reckless choices keeps stacking up. He jumps into schemes without thinking, trashes property during tantrums, and sometimes drags SpongeBob into situations that spiral fast. There are episodes where his anger flips on like a switch, and the destruction that follows feels way beyond cluelessness. Supporters of the theory point out how often he ignores consequences, shrugs off responsibility, or acts like harm never happened. He can be strangely manipulative too, playing dumb in one moment and showing sharp awareness in another if it benefits him. That contrast fuels the idea that the stupidity might not explain everything. He's broken rules, endangered friends, and rarely sits with guilt afterward. When those traits are stacked against the diagnostic checklist for antisocial personality disorder, fans see a character whose long-term behavior matches that framework surprisingly closely, turning comic relief into something darker. If you enjoyed this, I'd post movie and TV theories a lot here. I would greatly appreciate it if you could subscribe. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.